Hey, how's it going? This is Professor Krspo, and this is Music Production 101. What's up, guys? We made it to week 7. We got 2 weeks left. This week, we're going to talk about finalizing a track. We're going to talk about getting ideas out. We're going to chop some vocals up. We're going to add a second drop now to your first drop, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that in the arrangement. And I'm going to show you a couple little things here and there that we've already gone over, but we're just going to kind of refine. So let's get right into it. All right, guys, week 7, we made it, and we're back in the Wook Flu project file for the remix I was doing for my buddy Killa K from the Bay. So I just want to show you guys, because I think before I just had the first drop sort of made. I actually went back and I added a few more things to it, but I want to show you guys how I basically extended it and made a second drop. Because you guys should now have in your tracks your first drop, so you're probably wondering now, how do I do a second drop? So I'm going to show you guys that today and a few other things, but let's start off here. This is the first drop, and then I'm going to show you guys the break, the second drop, and then I'll show you. We'll go back and I'll show you what I did.
Let's get it.
That's close enough, Inspector.
All right, cool. So you notice with the second drop, it was a lot of the same elements as the first drop. I didn't like do anything too crazy. And then I just brought in like a few new sounds that hadn't really been heard, and then added a few new samples. So nothing too crazy. Let's start though with this vocal here, because it's super easy what I did. And it's something that you don't necessarily, I used a plugin called Portal to do it, but you don't necessarily need Portal to do it. You can do it with some of the stock effects as well. But I just want to show you guys what I did. So all I did essentially was I copied the vocal from this first part and then pasted it here, put it on its own track so I could kind of affect it differently and stuff. But this kind of like technique where you're just basically just copy and pasting something and then just adding like a slight change to it is really effective for, creating that arrangement where you have a first drop and then a little section in between and then the second drop. And it's really common. You'll see this a ton. If they don't go like first drop and then like a little section right back into the second drop, they'll do this where you have like a break and then a second build and then a drop. And very often, if you have vocals in your song, that's a good time to bring them in. And so all I did with this, you're going to see some really common stuff that we talked about, last week and the week before and the week before that, is this auto filter sweep on the vocal. I'll pull it up here. Go to auto filter. You can see the frequency. And you see how I'm sweeping it up? So this is just something really cool to do. It's really effective. These little sweeps. It makes it sound like kind of the vocals coming from like out from underwater or something. So, and I'm doing a couple other things. So notice I'm doing, this is a low pass filter that I'm doing. So that means the low end is, it's letting the low end pass. So the low end's not being touched. So to compensate for that, I went into the channel EQ and I cut only the lows. And then I also automated that. So if you go to your automation window, channel EQ, low gain, see? So I just kind of, and I drew this obviously. That's why it looks like a weird little squiggle worm thing. I just did it live. You just hit the record button. Make sure nothing is record enabled. See how this is record enabled? If I would have hit the record button, it would have recorded over whatever I have here. And that's no good. So be careful with that when you're doing automation. I always check. It takes just like a second to scroll up and just make sure. So just check before you do it. But this is a really effective technique. And it's similar to what I'm doing with the filter, but this is just the low end. So the filter, I'm affecting the high end, like how much high end I'm letting through. And then I'm doing the same thing with the low end. And it creates like tension. If you want to, that's another just way to create tension, is taking like low end away from something that has low end and then bringing it back slowly or not so slowly, depending on the track. And then the other thing I have going on here is I think it was bothering me. This is just a mix thing. It was bothering me like how the vocal was coming in. It was coming in like too early. And if you see, I don't really want it to come in until like towards the end here. So I just use the utility, which is just basic, utility plugin. I think I went over this in week 2. And all I'm using is the gain, and I'm automating that as well. And that's why you see the vocal, like technically, if I zoom in or if I make this bigger, technically the vocal starts here. But you don't even hear it in the track. I mean, you could faintly hear it if I solo it. Like very faintly, but you don't really hear it in the track until like around here. Which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted kind of that effect of like something kind of being pulled in. And then another little effect that I'm going to give you guys this, since now you've made it to week 7. This is a really cool little tool. It's Max for Live pitch drop. And you can change the duration. And this is essentially, if you guys are familiar, I know a lot of you guys come from the DJ class. So if you know, and if you're familiar with like, turntables, when you can change like the spin down speed, when you hit like the pause button or the stop, when you hit the stop the record, you can make it stop longer, like take longer to stop and kind of spin down. It's a really cool effect. And I'm using that on the vocal. You hear it at the end. It's not doing anything right now, but you'll see I automated, again, more automation, tons of automation on this little vocal track, but that's what makes it cool. And you see I activated just at the end here, and it's a really cool effect. Because I wanted to bring in that other sample. So this kind of like is a way for me to like show off the main vocal a little bit, like in its natural form, and then like spin it down, kind of. Again, this is like a remix track, so I don't want to like change the vocal so much it's unrecognizable.
That's close enough, Inspector.
So you see it shows it off, and then I spin it out. And oh yeah, I was going to show you guys Portal. This is a really cool plugin. So this is just a preset on Portal that I liked. And I think basically, if we go into the preset, there's a lot going on. So there's like a stretching going on. And then no grain delay. Okay, interesting. There's a stretching going on, and then the size and the density is being modulated. So that's really cool. But this is something you can do in Ableton stock. And actually a lot of what's going on this, besides like the pitch stuff, is just delay. So that's the other thing. If you guys look at the send track here, both of these send tracks, I'm sending a ton of reverb and a ton of delay. So that's why you're getting that kind of, it sounds like it's like really washed out at first, and then towards the end it's drier. So you'll hear it on this part. And now watch, it's gonna get drier. So that's another really cool technique, is kind of making something really wet and then drying it out right before the drop, or vice versa, having something be dry and like making it really wet right before the drop and kind of letting it like ring out. Another good technique. So these are just ways that you guys can make, like, now add like a little section to your second drop. And if you look at the drums, there's no drums even going on. So you just cut the drums that you have. So pretty cool section. No drums really happen at all. And then the drums that do happen are totally different. It's just like a drum build. I think this is just like a drum sample that my friend found. You know, it sounds very generic, but you know, that's not really what people pay attention to in these kind of songs. Like, no one really cares about the build, you know. That's cool to do, but you know, you can do it if you want. But it worked. So that's really what's important to me, is if it works. But you see, like, this section, it's just a break. And remember how we talked about using the effects and impacts and stuff? That's all this is, just some impacts. And then he does have like this cool bass stem that I kept. I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to keep this. It literally just sounds like he was messing around with a bass stem. So that's this is the kind of stuff you can experiment, have fun with these kind of break sections. Cause this is like, you know, the drops kind of have to sound a certain way. Sometimes your intro, you know, we went over before, you know, how it kind of works best if you use like kind of a certain formula. But these kind of sections in between, as long as there's no drums going on, then you can kind of really explore music and, you know, production and kind of mess around. That's really what it sounds like he did here. And then you just bring a little generic build in. Maybe some vocals. If you don't have vocals, just, you know, you can just use effects. But today we're going to talk about vocals too. So maybe let's get into that next. All right, guys, we are back in the project file from the first thing we ever did together. Do some vocal chops over this. I just want to show you guys how to do it. There's a couple different approaches. So let's get right to it. So yeah, I went on Splice. I found some vocals. Check them out.
We've come too far to turn around. Gotta keep pressing on.
So I mean, that sounds pretty good just like that, but let's kind of add our own like little spin on this. And so one way to do this, if you're kind of going for, if you like the way the vocal sounds, you don't really want to change too much about that. Which I think for this, I think we're kind of in that boat where we kind of like what it sounds.
We've come too far.
So if we like what it sounds like already, so then maybe what we can do is chop it up so that the rhythm of like when the parts come in are a little different. So I'm just going to put these little warp markers at the beginning of these phrases here, and we'll see if that works for us. And all you have to do to put these down is you just kind of hover your clicker or whatever right above it, and then you can just double click. And this should...
Gotta keep pressing on. Gotta keep pressing on.
All right. So we'll just do 3 for now, but you can do up to as many as you want, really. And you're going to see what happens. So the next step here in this process, we're going to right click, and we're going to hit slice to new MIDI track. Okay. And now you can create slices by the transient if you want, which are these little white lines. They auto detect every transient. Or you can do it by the warp marker, which are the yellow things that we put in. Okay, so there's a couple different options. We're just going to do the warp marker. If we sliced it, so it's going to result in 5 slices if we do this. If we had sliced it with the transients, it would have been 51 different slices. So I'm just trying to make it easier on myself and not have to go through 51 slices. So I'm just going to do 5 slices with the warp marker. And then if you notice, when I drop this vocal in, the BPM of this vocal is actually at 130. But see how it says warp? That means when I drop this in, Ableton automatically warped the vocal. So if we want to listen to it without the warping, here's what it sounds like.
We've come too far to turn around. Gotta keep pressing on.
So it sounds cool, but you can tell that the warping, it had a pretty cool effect on the vocal.
We've come too far.
Actually, let's just go back now. Here we go.
We've come too far to turn around.
It's got like almost a stretching effect, which I almost kind of like. It gets a little crackly in here, but I think for this sake, it's not that big of a deal. And we could always declick it later if it really becomes a problem. But I think for now, this is really cool. So I'm going to slice it. And I'm going to preserve the warp timing. Because like I said, I liked how it sounded with the warp. It was kind of cool. It had like it was subtle. It wasn't like, it didn't destroy it, which is the important thing. If it really messed with it, I would have just turned this off. And then it would have sliced it without any of the warping. Okay. So we're just going to hit OK. And you see it automatically creates a MIDI track of your vocal. So if I mute this, it should sound pretty much the same.
We've come too far to turn around. Gotta keep pressing on.
So, but now's the fun part because we don't need to keep this. And we can do our own slices with our MIDI controller. So check it out. Okay, that's not the slice we want.
We've come too far.
Okay. Well, oops.
To turn around.
So you might need to adjust because my MIDI controller, the pads are set to something else. It's not set to like conform to this completely. So you might need to pick up the clips and move them a little bit depending on what you're using.
We've come to turn around. Gotta keep pressing on.
Cool. So as I click these tracks, that's what's triggering them, and you can draw it in with MIDI too. It always helps to have a controller though; it makes it so much easier. And the cool thing about these slices too, you can actually go in, and if it's not kind of lining up the way you want it to,
We've come
turn this down a little bit too. Put some more verb on it.
to turn around.
So that's a cool thing too. There's all kinds of little things. So right now it's on classic. So that means when I let go of the key, it stops. But if you turn on one shot, then as you hit it, you get kind of a different effect. So that's another thing to kind of when you're slicing vocals. The classic kind of sampler one wasn't really working for me, so I just switched to the one shot. And then we'll see how that works out. And then let's just go into this next one. Maybe we'll do it all for all of them.
To turn around, turn around, turn around.
Cool. And yeah, you can fade it out. You can transpose it too. We're getting into all that. I'm just right now just trying to set myself up here.
Gotta keep pressing on.
Cool. Let's try that. See if that works a little better. Turn this down a little bit more. Like a little pop at the end of that. So that should fix that. And then let's transpose this a little bit maybe. So you just kind of have to sometimes massage the thing in. That's what you're kind of seeing me do right now. I'm just trying to messing with the timing, messing with the transposition of it or the pitch of it. Just a couple different things. Like the two on that actually now.
To turn around. Too far. To turn around.
So I'm starting to like this a little bit more. This is starting to sound good. So hopefully you guys see, sometimes it takes a little bit of you know, massaging is what I like to call it, but you got to kind of mess with the samples sometimes to make them fit. So that's just one really cool way to chop stuff up. And again, if you want to like, you can get really gritty and do like every, you know, if you want to have like this one be one, you can just make that, like do something like this. Duplicate the slice by holding Option, and you just click it and drag. And now I have this one. I can drag this one over like that. So that's a way if you want to get more in depth. You can also do that with the warp markers before you even warp it. You can go in and click each one. I find that the warp markers are a good way to get close, but oftentimes you're going to have to get into the sampler and move stuff around. But it's pretty easy to do once you kind of understand the tools. Classic one shot, slice. I don't use slice very often, but classic and one shot are definitely the way to go. And the cool thing about the one shot is, again, you can transpose it. You can fade it. You can do a lot more once you click it over to that setting. So yeah. All right, guys. I know we're jumping around a lot, but we're back in Wook Flu. I just wanted to show you guys just some more ideas that for the second drop, because that's you guys' assignment this week, is to make a second drop. So I kind of already showed you guys like the little break section of the build. You don't have to do the break section. You can do just like a build right after. It's just kind of just up to you. It's kind of up to the song usually, but just feel it out. Try both. See whatever works for you. But I just want to show you guys this second drop and kind of what I did here and just a few things, a few mixing things. Next week, we're going to go into like the finalization, final mixing stuff. But I just want to show you guys a couple little techniques that you can do before that final stage to make your mix nicer. But yeah, let's get into this drop and let me show you guys what I did. Okay, so the first thing I did to differentiate kind of the first drop from the second drop is I duplicated this call bass again. Remember this operator call bass that we made? Well, I duplicated it again because this one I wanted to play in this low octave. So it's essentially the same. It's essentially the same exact bass. There's nothing different about it per se. If you look at the oscillators, the difference between these two is none. It's the same. It's the same shape and everything. So, but if you notice, I did a couple different things with the effects on this bottom one. I'm boosting. I used the channel EQ. Both of them have this EQ, which is a low cut. So I'm cutting the sub out. And then this 4 dB high slope filter. And I'm just boosting everything above 500. So like around 900, that's where a lot of the detail, 500 to 900 is where a lot of that detail is and the grit in those sounds. And then all this is just like the top end that we're boosting. And we're doing that on both. Nothing different about that EQ. But on this one, I added an extra channel I added an extra channel EQ here with an additional mid boost and a high boost. So we're double boosting the high end, because if you listen to this bass without this, it's cool, but this extra high end is necessary for this. It needs that extra kind of high end boost. See how much more present it is? It's like more in your face. Not too much. It's just like a little extra. And it's like, again, remember when I said with mixing, it's like little stuff. That's a little thing, but it goes a long way. And then I'm adding some more saturation to it. Right? This isn't on this one. Oh no. Okay. Yeah. So I did this. I did the saturation in the OTT. Like I showed you guys last week. Just 4 dB of saturation. Nothing crazy. 100% time on the OTT. About 8 dB of makeup gain to make up for what this is doing. You got to add a little bit of makeup gain, and then I just bring the amount down a little bit. You guys can save this. I'm going to send you guys, now that you guys have made it to week 7, I'm going to send you guys project files and stuff so you can just save all this stuff. Just hit the save button, call it whatever you want. Okay, and then a little bit of overdrive too, because the overdrive, and I use the EQ part of the overdrive. Remember how I said you could focus the overdrive depending on where you want it? So I decided I want more of the high-end overdrive. And I'm only using like 5% of it, so it's not even like a lot. But it adds just a little extra. Yeah, just a little extra grit, a little extra crunch. Subtle stuff, guys. You don't have to like go crazy with effects. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I really changed. But the main thing that changes is I go down an octave. And then I had to add all this extra stuff just to kind of make it more present, because like sometimes with samples, you'll notice if you go down too far, they get kind of like weird and like almost unusable. This one ended up being kind of cool. And then I just kind of enhanced what I liked about it, which is the high end with all this. So that is just a quick little thing on that drop. And then this last one, this one's a little different. So you notice I add now this extra oscillator in, and that's why you get this kind of different. That different kind of tone. And then I did something cool with this this LFO tool, which is another plugin. This one isn't free, unfortunately, but this is something that maybe you could replicate just with volume automation, because that's really all this is I'm just like turning the volume. But essentially, like it, I'll go to it here. You can see the depth, which is the amount. So when this first hits, there's no LFO. And then when it starts as it starts gaining, you're going to hear that kind of whoa, 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 whoa. So you can do that with the volume. You just kind of draw like little, like something like this. It's volume. So you would want that hit to happen, but then you would do like little zigzags kind of. Oops. Why isn't that going? Like that. See. So you could do it without the LFO tool. The LFO tool just makes it like so much easier. But again, you don't need all this extra crap. Just you got everything you need with the stock plugins. This is just kind of, again, like a little like detail that probably nobody notices except for me, but I like it. So and then I'm taking, actually, now I have the channel EQ back on here. I'm cutting some of the high end, some of this high end here, just to leave room for kind of the drums and stuff. And like most of the stuff that sits up here is like, yeah, going to be your drums and stuff. So if you notice your drums are getting like buried, it's probably a good idea to just crank some of the highs down on the synths. You don't really notice it. One really good producer told me you don't really need anything above 7K on synths, or at least a lot of these like these mid basses synths. Maybe not like synths like keys. I'm not saying cut your keys. It might sound cool, but don't do it just as like a rule of thumb. But for like mid basses and wubs and stuff, you're not gonna miss anything up here from that, and it leaves more room for your drums. So just little mixing techniques. I remember, and look at this, I'm cutting a lot of the low end from this, so it's really just, but it sounds so beefy because there's this bass layer that my friend did, Without that, it would sound really wimpy, this part. Here, I'll do it without even the top bass, because this might fool your ears into thinking there's low end. Remember how I told you guys you could do that? See how wimpy it is? And then watch, check out this illusion. You're gonna... You feel that? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work if I point it out, but it worked on me the second time. I was like, man, it still sounds fat. And I'm like, oh, wait. It's because there's this little... I swear, guys, it's weird stuff. I wouldn't tell you this to do this stuff with your songs if it didn't work, but like little layers like that, especially on your bass. You don't need to make it 2 separate tracks like he did, but you can like put it on your bass. I'll show you guys that here in a second. Okay, so we're jumping around a lot, but this is now just a little track. I just started working on this track, so this is kind of in the beginning stages, but I want to show you guys just this is, I think, a good example of that bass thing that I was kind of explaining, and just another way you can do it where you don't need to make like a whole separate track, you know.
Shoot my shot on. Shoot my shot on. Get on, get on, get on. Shoot my shot on. Get on.
Okay. So I just want to show you guys what I did with this sub bass. So let's open it up. So here's what it sounds like without any of this nonsense.
Shoot my shot on.
So not bad, but all this is just a stock serum sound that I found. And if you don't know what serum is, it's just another synth that you can use, and they have a ton of presets you can buy. I've bought a bunch of presets off of Splice, and you can basically go through Splice and just, you know, buy presets, and it's really cool. But that's not really that important. Really, all this is a sine wave. So it's nothing crazy. It's not like anything you can't do with a stock plugin or Vital. I showed you guys how to do the sub with Vital already, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, listen to this without any of the effects. It's not bad. Pretty basic sub bass, you know. So one thing I like to do to kind of like hype up sub basses, and it's similar to kind of what my buddy did on that track, is you add like an amp to it. And this is just kind of adds like a little bit of top end. It kind of fills out the spectrum. I love this blues amp. I almost always use the blues amp. And it just happens to be like the first one that opens when you open it up, and it just sounds cool. And you just dial down the gain or the dry wet, and it's usually perfect. And it also puts your stuff in mono for you too. You don't necessarily need to do that, but I usually don't touch this. I just let it be in mono. And then, so I think I showed you guys the amp though already. I showed you that technique already, and I showed you the hiss too already. Just to add the hiss, it's in the erosion hiss. That's an old technique. It's been, a lot of people have been using that for a while now. But this new technique, I'm going to show you guys. This is something new that I like to do. I'll mute the overdrive for now. Is use an audio effects rack to create like a parallel chain. So anytime anyone says like, what is like, anyone's talking about parallel, like parallel compression, or parallel effects. Basically, all it means is you're running a dry signal, which is what this bottom part of the chain is. This bottom one is the dry signal. Because if you see all that's on it is a little bit of saturation. Nothing too crazy on the dry signal, which I would have done anyway. Remember I showed you the bass that I made before? It had saturation. So nothing crazy. But then the wet signal here has 22 dB of saturation. And then I messed with the base of the saturation too, and I moved it a little higher, just a little bit, because I still wanted to pick up that grit of the low end, but I wanted it mostly on the high end. And then if you look, I cut all the sub out of it. So you might be thinking like, why are you cutting sub frequencies out of your own sub? That doesn't make any sense. Well, this is similar to what my buddy did, but it's on the same track. So I don't have to have a separate track. So this is basically if you can envision this is like the track in Wook Flu that I just showed you, that other layer that I showed you that was just kind of like hiss. That's essentially what this is. Like if I solo it. So that's just that high end. That's all it is the high end of the sub bass. But when you combined it with the low end of the sub bass, that's when you kind of get this really cool, like thick. It's super hard. It's hitting like super hard. And the coolest thing about this is, I'm going to mute the audio effects rack here real quick. I just want to show you guys. Open up span. Actually, I think the easiest way is let me copy this. And we're going to put it in here just so I can show you guys in here. So check this out. So that's where our sub is hitting right now. 24. That's like pretty hot. Okay. And that's why we're turning it down -5. So we're not blowing out the master. But that's not the problem. Check this out. You turn this on. See how much louder it sounds, right? But if you look on the spectrograph, the volume really hasn't changed of the sub. The sub is the same. But now the new thing is all this extra like juicy harmonic. So if you want louder songs, this is a way to do it, is to have like a really saturated version or a highly compressed version of your original sound parallel. And this is a way to do it in Ableton. You can do it all sorts of ways. There's like a million different ways to skin a cat, but this is the way that I've found the easiest, is you can keep it all on one track. You don't necessarily need to do what my buddy did in the Wook Flu, where he had a whole separate track for this. You can keep it all on one track and you just turn it down like -27 or something, -20, a high negative, because it's going to be really loud. And you don't need a lot of it because you're still getting some grit, remember, from the amp already. You're already getting some of that. This just is like a way to add that extra like 10%, whatever. 5%, 10, whatever. This is the way to take your song. Like at this point in the class, I mean, we only have like 2 weeks left. So at this point in the class, your track should be getting like pretty good. This is just a way to get your track like that much better. Do some parallel processing. And then I added some overdrive too, just to kind of make it a little extra chunky. Again, just 10%. Nothing crazy. Like I'm not trying to like blow it out again. I want this to be around the same, but I'm just trying to find ways to get volume without turning the sub up. And ways to get volume in your sub without turning the sub up is to add harmonics with overdrive, amps, saturation, hiss, all these little tools. And then when it's all said and done, I turned it down. After all that, I went and turned it down. And you're probably thinking like, what is the point of doing all that if you're just going to take a high shelf filter and just cut all the highs? Well, it sits better in the mix this way. So yeah, it sounds really cool. I made it sound really cool, but now this EQ, this is all about shaping the frequency and like shaping your mix. And like in my mix, I didn't, and again, this is just a taste thing. Some of you guys are probably like, man, it sounds way better with the fuzzy bass. And you wouldn't be wrong, that's you. If you like that, that's cool. I thought, after I got the bass sounding how I wanted to sound, like harmonically and, sitting where I wanted to sit dynamically, I figured I can kind of shape the tone and cut a little bit of the highs just to bring out the synth and to bring out kind of the spaciness of the song. Because what happens is with all this distortion, it just kind of makes your song sound like a little distorted. And I wanted a little distortion sounding, but not like, I don't want my song to sound distorted. I just want, it to be on the bass, like as an underlayer. So this is like a middle ground kind of. Like my bass is still hitting. It's still cutting through the mix. But now I can like just, trim a little bit of the highs off and make it really fit in my mix like perfectly. So yeah, that's just a little example of the bass and, how to different ways of layering and creating sub and creating fullness in your mix without blowing your master out of the water. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how do you create this audio effects rack chain thing that I've been like tooting and hollering about? So I'm going to show you. So I'm just duplicating this track real quick so we can see. It's same track. I'm going to mute that, mute this. Let's just mute all this stuff. Except for that. Because we'll keep all that. All right. And then let me make this smaller here. There we go. All right. So all we're going to do, very simple stuff here. I'm just going to grab any of these effects, but we're going to grab saturator because we want to do saturation. About 3 dB, right? That's what we said. So all I'm doing is Command G. I think I showed you guys how to group stuff before, but this creates this audio effects rack. And all you do is you're going to click these little 3 lines with the dots, and you got your chain. And now to make another chain, you just hit Command D. And now boom, we got 2 chains, not the wrapper. So if you want to affect one chain, we go up to the top there. Let's crank this chain up. Change the bass, and then we need to put an EQ on this chain as well because this chain can't have any low end. All right, so now let's mute this one. So now we got this first chain.
Shoot my shot.
All right, and then our second chain, we can activate that now. So, and then obviously you can blend it to taste. So we'll turn it down a little bit. So pretty simple stuff, but I just want to make sure you guys knew how to do that. All right. And we're jumping around a lot today. I know, guys. Back into Wook Flu because I want to show you guys another way to make stuff sound loud. We're making stuff loud. I mean, we're doing that mostly a lot next week too, but this is just another technique I want to show you guys. So all I did is I had all these call basses that I made, and I had this wub that I made. I think I originally put these sounds in there too, but I didn't actually like how they sounded, so I ended up taking them out. But these 3 sounds, these Phat calls. Here, I'm going to turn this wider off real quick for you guys. You can just hear the difference. Okay, so that's without the wider, right? Turn it on. You guys hear that? It's like way more 3D, way wider. Hence the plugin. Only 50%, nothing crazy. But adding wideness to sounds is another way to make them louder without making them louder on our little analyzer thing. You know what I'm saying? Like blowing out your master. So you can just widen stuff and it'll sound louder just naturally from the widening. And then, so another thing you can do, and I did this on all the wubs, I think every single one of them. Yeah, every single one that I added, I went in and added additional saturation and like compression with this sausage fattener plugin. So that one's, again, sorry, not a free one, but you can get the same effect by basically just using compression, saturation. I'm pretty sure if you look up like Ableton, like effects racks, you can probably find a free sausage fattener. I'm pretty sure there is one. I've heard of it. So definitely something worth checking out. Because if you add it on all your effects like I did, you get a nice fat signal. And you might be like, whoa, that was so loud. That's why you add a utility. And again, this is the thing I was showing you guys before where you just drop an effect in. So if I just dropped a sausage fattener right here, and then I hit Command G, and then say I want, now I'm like, okay, this is really loud. I like the sound, but it's way too loud. And it's blowing out my master. Oh my God, come on. Get in there. That's why you add the utility. So the utility basically works as like gain staging, gain compensation. So the sausage fattener is adding a ton of gain to your signal. So a good way to combat that is you just turn it down. And now, because you've done this, you have a better way of actually looking at what the sausage fattener is doing. Because one thing you're going to notice, like when you're working on stuff, if you make something louder, naturally, it's going to sound better. Louder is just better usually. So this is a way to make sure, like, I'm not just making it louder for the sake of making it louder. Like, I'm making it louder and it's also improving because I'm adding all these things. I'm adding saturation, I'm adding compression. And, you know, all those things tend to make stuff louder. So usually what you want to do is if you're, you know, you notice, okay, I've got all these effects. Say I had like, you know, a bunch of effects. You know, I have compression. I've got saturation. Maybe I have some overdrive. If you have all these effects that are making your signal louder, something that's really important to do is group them all and then slap a utility on the end of it. And this will just basically give you the ability now to gain stage your effects. So I'm going to show you what that means. So I have the sausage fattener. We all agreed without the utility. Like way too loud and way louder. Like if I turn these effects off. If I turn the effects off, it's, you know, it's actually in the mix because it's, you know, where I had it before. So, but I want to add like extra grit. I want to find a way to add like extra loudness, extra power to these tracks. So in comes, I'm just going to delete this one. In comes now the utility where I can bring this down to about the same volume as it was before I added the sausage fattener. See? So now it's back to that volume, and now we can also check. So now we can check our work to see if this actually helped the sound or if it didn't really do anything. And then we can hit it back. I think it helped it. It added like a little extra wideness, a little extra thickness. Again, we don't want to like overdo it. We don't want to blow it out of the water or like completely change it because we like the way it sounds, right? So this week, it's all about me. I'm trying to show you guys how you can shape frequencies, how you can kind of just add like that last 10% to your track. If you're stuck at like, man, I've got this track sounding pretty good, but how do I make like my sounds like a little bit more powerful, a little bit thicker? this is a way, just a little bit of compression, a little saturation, and then just make sure when you do these kind of things, you're not just making it louder, you're compensating for that and turning it back down and making sure it still fits in your mix. So that's all this is, but it's really important. This is something that like I struggled with for a while because I would add all these effects to stuff and I would be like, man, it sounds so much better. And then I go check my mix and the mix is all messed up because the latest element that I added and I added all this stuff to is like, take it over. It's like way too loud and maybe it doesn't even sound better. It's just like loud and distorted now. Like this is a way for you can check that. Just use the utility, turn stuff down. You can even check on the fader, you know, if it's I think I'm on I keep acting like I'm on Pro Tools and hitting the Pro Tools command for this. But you can check the fader on the wubs. So it's still hitting at -12, right? And let me turn this off. Let's see where it hits at now with that off. So actually the other one is louder, even though, well, technically loud. It's more peaky is what it is. It's not louder. It's peakier. And that was one of the things I was trying to solve. I was like, I don't want it to be so peaky. So I compressed it and I saturated it, and I just happened to, again, this is just you have to pay for this plugin, but it does both at the same time without me having to like do that. So it's just quicker basically. That's the only reason I used it. I could have done the exact same thing with compression, saturation, overdrive, but it was just quicker for me to throw this one plugin on there and move one knob, and I didn't even use the color because, you know, I don't know, I guess I'm lazy, but I fixed it. I made sure that it was compensated for. So I wasn't that lazy because, again, I went and put the utility on there, made sure it was compensated for. And then I also, you know, I checked my work and I made sure it sounded better. And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted less peakiness and more thickness, and I got it. So that is that. That's why you know, people talk about gain staging. If you notice my friend's track that he sent, it's like perfectly gain staged. Like you'll notice that none of the, nothing hits past like this 12. It's like perfectly gain staged. That's why if you look at, we'll go in here, we'll look, see all the stems are like very small. And then the stuff I added is like gigantic, and I had to, you know, obviously I turned it way down in the mix, which is why it fits. But yeah, even these, see how much like thicker my stuff is? It's just because he gain staged his stuff. So that just means I have to turn my stuff down to match his gain staging. And it's important because if somebody sends you stems and then you go in and you add all your sounds and your sounds are way louder, it's just not going to fit. You know, this song fits and everything sounds like it's cohesive because I went in and did things like this, utility down. I went in and turned certain things down like -14 dB, you know, a lot if I had to. Use the faders first, but if you're adding effects, this is another way you can do it. All right, guys. So I just want to show you guys a few more things that you can do with Vital and with, you know, your sounds and stuff. So this is some cool little system overload. This is what I call it, sound that I have. Pretty cool. But the main thing I want to show you guys is the pitch wheel thing that I'm doing here. So see how it's like starting up here and it's going down? I guess let me show you what it sounds like without that. So pretty cool. But I'm just affecting the pitch. And remember how I was saying when we were talking about the operator and making sounds and using like the pitch bend at the beginning to kind of add that extra punch? That's what we're doing here, using the pitch wheel over here. You're going to see it starts at the top, comes down, kind of adds this like, you know, cool effect. So that's just a little thing you can do. And I did it like a bunch of different ways here. Because here it comes again. This time reversed. It's going up. Oops. And then I did it again with this thing at the end. So just little stuff. And these were just kind of all like little fills at the end of these like drop sequences. 2, 1, 2,
Let's get it.
1, 2, 1, 2. So yeah, I just threw a couple of those in there. I thought that was really cool. And then notice this. I just want to keep, reiterating these cuts. And, these cuts on these, they're like low mid basses. You don't need like a lot of highs on them. And you're going to do this a lot. This is like a very common thing. You're cutting all the extra highs that you don't need, and you're cutting all the sub. Because you don't need a sub, because remember we talked about we have our sub layer. So if you have a sub layer, then you don't want to clutter your low end. You want to keep your low end clean, and that's a way to do it. You just do those cuts. And this is universal. I know I've been showing you guys a lot of like bass music examples today, but this is universal. So every genre, you want to keep your low end clean and make those cuts. So we're back in this hip hop beat. I just want to show you guys some examples. This one it's just a serum preset. Perfect for some hard SoundCloud rap. But it's really using all the same stuff we talked about already in the synthesis, sine waves, doing bends. Remember we did it with the operator. You're seeing it again here. This is just a pitch bend at the beginning of that. The effects, compression, distortion, reverb, filter. All stuff we've talked about. And oh yeah, EQ. Oh look, it's a little high cut. Because you don't need highs on a bass. So this is like a hip hop beat kind of. Or like a trap beat or whatever. So I'm not sidechaining this 808 at all. I don't think it's necessary all the time. Some basses you do want to sidechain with the kick, but in this case it doesn't really make much sense. So I'm just leaving the 808. And the drums, they're just hitting normal. And then you have your lead. And then I have this cool little thing that comes in. This is just a sample that I found. And you're seeing that pitch. Remember that pitch drop, I think is what it's called. Yeah, pitch drop. So I'm using that again on this synth. Just at the end of these phrases, kind of. But these things are so easy to make and they're so fun to make. It's really just a couple little like reverse crashes, a synth, an 808. I just put the saturator on here with the soft clip, and it basically ensures that the master is not going to get clipped. Kind of like a little cheat code. And you see we got a nice fat, healthy waveform. There's a little bit of dynamic range. It's not all just like squashed. We got some range, but all of our sounds are hitting, and you see the drums just cutting right through the sub. That's why you don't need to duck your sub when you're doing hip hop beats. You just don't. Your drums are gonna cut through like 9 times out of 10. there's no like top bass on top of it, like when we're making like the dubstep, or if you're making like future bass or anything where you have all these bass layers that are on top of your sounds, that's when you need to duck everything. But if you're just making a hip hop bass with a couple layers, or a hip hop beat with a couple layers and a bass, you're good to go. All right, guys, that was week 7. This week's assignment is all about adding to your arrangement and creating now a second drop, using what we learned today and some of those techniques. Maybe like cut up some vocals, maybe use some more effects that we talked about before. Work on some different variations on your sounds that you've already made. I want to see them a little bit more refined now. Add some effects, maybe some OTT, maybe some saturation. Just experiment, have fun. This is the second to last week. Next week we're going to talk about mastering and cleaning everything up and just making sure it's polished and ready to distribute. So this week is just all about getting your track like almost finished, and getting that last 10%, like I was talking about, getting that, and use those techniques that we talked about today to get there. Looking forward to listening to you guys' tracks, and I'll see you next week.